You find yourself enveloped in a dense, humid mist. Every breath of air you take is so thick that you can practically drink it, and it's heavy with the damp, sulfurous stench of stagnation and decay. Across the rough trail ahead of you, a fallen tree trunk suddenly begins to move in a very unsettling way, writhing and scuttling across the ground. It's not a downed tree at all, but a giant millipede, the biggest land invertebrate of all time, a prehistoric creature called Arthropleura. It's an easy mistake to make because Arthropleura is around 2.5 meters long and nearly 60 centimeters wide. And it isn't alone, because you've barely had time to process the size of this enormous bug before another flies right past you, Meganura, a dragonfly relative about the size of a pigeon. You're standing in the middle of a late Carboniferous swamp, hugging the shore of a shallow sea around 310 million years ago. The ground is muddy and wet, and you need to watch your step. Since the rise of the first forest in the Devonian period, plants have continued to diversify and cover the continents, raising the oxygen level in the atmosphere to new heights. With little competition from other animals on land, insects and other arthropods are living large. And they're not the only things that are. Giant tree-like plants dominate this landscape, reaching upwards of 50 meters tall. They're mostly lepidodendron, sometimes called scale trees, though they're not quite like any trees you've ever seen before. Their green trunks are made of living photosynthetic tissue and textured like alligator skin with a pattern of diamond-shaped scales. These long, scaly green poles branch only at their very top, where they fork to form crowns of narrow, spiraling leaves shaped like huge blades of grass. And surrounding these giants are many other plant species that form a thick and complex swamp understory. It's tough to find a path, and you try not to trip over exposed roots. The endless green is broken up only by blue-gray pools of murky swamp water, and the brown fallen trunks, branches, and foliage of dead plants. And as this plant debris gradually sinks into the watery, anoxic depths of the swamp, it doesn't fully decay, but instead accumulates underwater as peat. Eventually, after millions of years of intense pressure and compression, this peat will harden into coal. Much of the coal that powers the modern world is being formed right here, right now, in the ancient swampy rainforests of the Carboniferous period, which literally means coal-bearing. It's a reminder of the way the geological record connects the past you found yourself in with the present you came from. But it's not the only connection, because you're here too, a distant relative of a new kind of vertebrate just emerging in this ancient world. Most vertebrates in the Carboniferous are tied to the water for much of their life. You spot a few of these big, newt and salamander-like amphibians here and there in the swamp, poking their heads out of the water or chilling on the shore, their moist skin glistening in the sun. While amphibians are the most common and diverse vertebrates of the Carboniferous, another revolutionary group has also arrived on the scene at this time. They're far less common and much harder to find, but as you slowly trek through the swamp, you glimpse an unmistakable trace of their presence: an egg. And not the wet, gelatinous egg of an amphibian, but the amniotic egg, encased in a leathery, cream-colored shell, nestled in the leaf litter at your feet. It doesn't seem that remarkable at first. You've seen bigger and frankly better-looking eggs in your time, but it's one of the most pivotal adaptations to evolve in the entire Carboniferous. This tiny egg tells you that at least some vertebrates roaming this swamp have broken ties to the water completely. These new land-adapted eggs have allowed Carboniferous amniotes, the ancestors of all reptiles, birds, and mammals to come, to earn the title of Fully Terrestrial Vertebrates. A title that they've passed down all the way to you, their direct descendant, over 300 million years later. And just like that small, strange egg, you're about to find out if this world will either make or break you. Hello Hello, and welcome to Eons, Surviving Deep Time, a podcast that gives you a human's eye view of what trying to survive in the past might have looked like. I'm Callie Moore, one of the hosts of PBS Eons, a YouTube channel about the history of life on Earth. And I'm here with Gabriel Santos, one of my co-hosts, to figure out if we would have been dead or thriving during the Late Carboniferous Period. Hello, Gabriel. How are you?
Hi, Callie. I am doing great. I'm ready
Great.
to do some time traveling.
Wonderful. All right. Well, what is one thing that you know about the Carboniferous?
The one thing that I really know about the Carboniferous is it's in the past it was called like the Age of Ferns because there are a lot of those seed ferns. But now I know that those aren't actually ferns. They're like their own thing, distantly related, but they kind of look like ferns. As somebody who has recently developed pteridomania or fern, a love of ferns, I was very, very much into that. And so the idea of walking through, a fern forest really, really excites me.
Yeah, you're tapping into your Victorian roots, huh? With your obsession of ferns.
Yeah, I have a tiny little tank behind me full of like two or three different species of ferns right now. So you could say that.
That's amazing. So, why do you think we picked this time to travel back to, the late Carboniferous?
It's like a cool area with like new things to explore, but just different enough from what we know. There's weird plants, giant insects. It kind of feels like the starting area for like an RPG game. So maybe that's why.
Yeah. Of course, all those plants create those coal swamps that we talked about in the intro. And so it was these really rich and complex ecosystems that were forming. We had land plants and invertebrates and vertebrates. So there's a ton of diversity to think about and look at for sure. And the richness of this terrestrial ecosystems during the Carboniferous is at least partly because of the mass extinction at the end of the Devonian, right before the Carboniferous. But even though that really only hit marine life, it left the terrestrial life relatively untouched. So that's kind of fun. It's also big amphibian time. So I'm sure you're
Yeah.
familiar with the toilet seat amphibians because their head kind of looks like the shape of a toilet seat, flat and kind of oblong.
I mean, I've never heard them called that before, but I definitely will from now on.
Yeah, once you see it, you can never unsee it. You can never unsee it. Yes. And
No, and I'm sure like a bunch of the second graders that I give tours to are absolutely going to love that.
yeah, I bet you've got some of those big amphibians in the Alf. Actually, I'm pretty sure you do. I've been there. I've
Yeah.
seen them with my own eyes. My favorite part of the late Carboniferous is it's also big bug time. So you had the colonization of land. It started way earlier than vertebrates. So insects and arachnids and all sorts of stuff started coming on land, but it allowed them to fill this medium and large sized animal niches that later periods would have been occupied by vertebrates. Plus, the atmospheric oxygen is like 30 to 35%, the highest of like all times. So that helped these big insects get even bigger because they have a pretty inefficient respiratory system. But when you got a lot of oxygen, it can get them a little bit bigger. But mainly they just don't have any competition, which is, I think, just wonderful. Good for the bugs. Way to
Yeah,
way to take
good for the
charge.
bugs. I think that's probably where I might have trouble with as we chat about this down the line. The creepy crawlies I don't do very well with in our current time period, so I don't know how well I might survive in a world where they are giant.
Where they are so giants. So, we're going to explore a few different hazards of this time period. And I'm curious what your first priority, your top concern out of climate, environmental geological hazards, food and water, and animal hazards would be during this time.
Mine would definitely be food and water. I get hangry very fast. So I would need to make sure that I have enough energy and water to one, outrun a lot of these giant insects if they are going to be chasing me. Even if they're not, I probably would just start running out of habit, right? But yeah, I want to make sure I got my food and water, my essentials to survive in this, really strange, almost alien landscape to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's think about food and water for a little bit. So, we've talked about how like dense the forest ecosystems were. So we've got a lot of fuel for fire at this point in the game. So we got scale trees, we got some of the earliest gymnosperm seed plants. So these are the seed producing plants, like cycads. They're around and they're kind of woody. So hopefully we'd be able to start a fire if we know how to start a fire. Do you know how to start a fire?
I do actually.
Yes.
That's one of my like big accomplishments that I was able to learn in my time as a geologist was to learn how to actually start a fire.
Wonderful. Right. So check. Got that off the box. So we've got a few options for starting a fire, and we might have had some wildfire to deal with too. So we could just like steal some of it and take our little embers around to wherever we're at and start a fire anytime. So I think for cooking wise, we're okay as long as we can find something to cook in.
Maybe like an old millipede shell or
Oh
something,
yeah, they would
right?
be pretty big.
Yeah.
I think chitin, once it dries out, it might be a little flammable, but if we do like low heat, might be all right.
Yeah.
Low heat.
Yeah. Just enough to heat it up, get rid of any bacteria that might be sitting around on there.
Yep. And like I said, we got lots of plants to choose from. You mentioned ferns. We've got fiddlehead ferns. These are edible if you boil them first.
Yeah.
So we definitely need to find some way to boil at least for sure. But ferns could totally be on the menu. Have you ever had fiddlehead ferns?
I have once, and that was the one thing when I learned that this is where we're going to be going. I was like, I know exactly what I'm going to start harvesting. I'm going to have a bunch of those ready to go, and I'll be set for at least a few days until like my protein needs spike.
Speaking of protein needs, what about eating some giant insects?
I mean, okay. So if my hunger gets to that point, yeah, I will do it. I have no qualms about eating insects today. I've tried them a few times. I think the giantness I might need to like get over maybe once I cut it up. Maybe if I'm, this is assuming I can catch them. If I can like chop them up, I might be fine. But I think I should be okay. I'll probably just start like saying like the whole Lion King thing in my head where it's like, what does Timon and Pumbaa say?
Oh yeah, with the growth.
Slimy yet satisfying.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That'll just be my mantra as I'm trying to survive in the Carboniferous.
Right, right. Yeah. And Arthroplora we might not want to eat because modern millipedes have some toxins. There is one culture that does eat them, but they boil them and then dry them in the sun for 3 days. So it's a process, but maybe we would definitely want to be careful with those. But the dragonflies, however, pigeon-sized dragonflies, if we can catch them, that's going to be the tough thing because modern dragonflies maximum speed somewhere between 22 and 34 miles per hour.
Can't they like do a actual like loop to loop or something in the air too?
They are aerial predators to the finest for sure. So that might be a little tough, but there's in Bali locals catch them by dipping bamboo poles into like a sticky tree sap and then like swatting them out of the air.
Okay.
So if we can find something that's sticky, we might be able to get them that way. Otherwise, we could just eat their larva out of the water because I'm assuming they're also very large larvae for such a big dragonfly.
Do we know if there's evidence of like sap already in the Carboniferous or anything like that?
Probably not, unless there's a species of like cycad that has some gooey stickiness. Maybe we can find like a tar pit or just like wet mud. Maybe just like fresh wet mud might be enough to just swat them out of the air. Or we could take batting practice, just knock them out of the
I,
park.
I'm just gonna start becoming like a Pokemon trainer and trying to catch all like these giant ones and having them catch other insects for me. That's probably where I would start
Ooh,
going.
yes, train them to catch the food for you. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that's
Right?
brilliant. That's
Get
brilliant.
some get some like like vines or no, there's probably not vines in the way we think about, but like something to create like a rope, catch it, get it around its neck, and then just let it go and let it catch other insects for me.
That's clever. That's very clever. So okay, we've got insects definitely we can eat. And we've got some ways to catch those insects probably. What about the vertebrates? How do you feel about giant amphibian legs and things like that?
I don't know if I could do that. I don't like frog legs now, but there's fish, right? Like
There are fish.
They're fish.
There's fish.
So yeah, I'd go out in the water. I'd start trying to spear fish, I guess, avoiding the giant amphibians along the way. But yeah, I'd go for the fish over the amphibians first. Now, if for some reason that's not going to work out and my hunger levels reach a certain level, amphibians better watch out. 'Cause, again, I'm going to fight off my hangry. So whatever is around, I'm probably going to go for.
Yeah, and we might want to look at like the smaller, like the youths of the giant amphibians, because some of these got like several meters in length as an adult. So they might be kind of hard to hunt because we also think they might have been ambush predators. So maybe a good whack on the head. I don't know. Like there's modern cultures that eat the giant Chinese salamanders and they're considered a delicacy. So they could be tasty if we roast them over a low flame or something like that. And also get them.
Yeah, get them.
We got to watch out for anything that's poisonous, because like poison dart frogs, they might be bad. So definitely stay away from anything that's flashy or has any striking colorations on their body. It was a warning that don't eat me. I'm nasty.
I think my problem with that is whenever I'm like out, even though I don't like bugs very much and like hiking or whatever, if something looks interesting, I'm gonna my science brain or like my primitive brain's like, ooh, pretty, must look at closer. So that's probably gonna be one of my own hazards. It's like while looking for food is I'm gonna just like want to look at everything up close and maybe touch a few things because I'm like that thing in Jurassic Park where they're like, why do they always have to touch? That's me. And so I probably will have to like change my mindset and be like, not everything I have to touch. You got to be careful. Find food.
Hands in your pockets. Hands in your pockets.
Or like I can make like cool weapons that are also my touching like implements so that I can like touch them from afar and not get in trouble that way.
Yeah, a good poking stick for sure. Yep. There are some other vertebrates. So we have Hylonomus, like a reptile-like early amniote. And they would be like scurrying on the undergrowth, hunting other small things. So we might get a chance to eat some lizard or a relative. A relative or something like that. Oh my goodness.
The one thing you had said in the intro was there's eggs, right?
Yes.
I'm going to start collecting as much eggs as I can. I'm going to start making omelets, maybe some fiddlehead fern omelets or something.
Ooh.
Who says I can't be a little gourmet even though I'm stuck in the Carboniferous, but I definitely would go for those eggs. I mean, they're a good source of protein, they're easy to cook.
Mm-hmm.
Would I eat it raw like Gaston? Probably not, but I know where to get them.
Yeah, it's probably not smart to eat raw eggs at any time. Really, got to watch out for those. Also, egg size. Like, are we talking quail egg? Are we talking hummingbird egg? You might have to eat a whole bunch, like a whole handful of little eggs for a full mouthful, right?
Just walking around with like tiny bunch of eggs in my hand, just trying to make sure I don't drop them. But again, my hangry levels, I'd do it. I'd find a bunch. Make a bunch of tiny little hard-boiled eggs for the road.
Yeah, and then just eat them shell and all so you get your calcium, because I think they're going to be like tiny sized eggs probably. So we just be popping them like TikToks. Well, we just be popping them like Tic Tacs, that'd be hilarious. But we probably want to stay away from the amphibian eggs though. Like,
yeah.
There are some people that eat them, but you have to make sure they're boiled for long enough or fried in some type of oil, like definitely not raw. So it's a little iffy on the amphibian eggs, although I'm sure they would be much more easy to find and abundant.
Do amphibians have fat? Can I make oil from those giant amphibians?
Oh, that's a great question. I would think so. I mean, they have muscle. They probably have lipids of some kind in their body, I would assume.
Then I'll probably make fried amphibian.
This is amazing.
I'll eat anything fried.
Anything fried. Yep. You drop it in oil and I'm good to go. Yep. Exactly. I agree.
Look, I might be stuck in the Carboniferous, but comfort and happiness is always top for me to make sure I'm surviving.
Right. Agreed there. Agreed there. So I guess now the last thing we got to find though is water. Fresh, clean water. And so we're in a swamp which has a bunch of stagnant still water, which should not be drank under any
Yeah.
circumstances. So we're definitely going to have to find some type of running fresh water, either a river or a creek or a stream, or we could set up a rainwater collection system or something.
That's what I was thinking because the Carboniferous, right? It's a different climate, it's a lot more wet, it's going to be really damp, which we'll get to that later. I know I'm not going to have a good time, but I can probably collect some rainwater, maybe do like a reverse what's it called where you collect all the dew and it just kind of falls down into like a little my my little megapleura, or no, what's it called? The giant millipede cup that I've
Arthropleura.
made. Arthropleura shell cup that I've made and have it drip down in there, collect some water from that. And I'm sure like there's got to be like some of the plants and stuff that I can probably try to draw water from too, right?
Maybe squeeze tap into their system like maple syrup, only get water out of it. So really, your biggest concern, I feel like we've kind of got it covered.
Yeah, I feel good about that. I get a +1 to survival. I'm cool with that.
So let's talk about climate now, though, because you brought up
Yes.
dampness, heat, hot, humidity. So there was like this overall cooling and drying trend that started in the early Carboniferous and goes to the late Carboniferous. And there was some massive glaciers that would eventually form around the South Pole, but the equatorial coal swamps that we're in remain warm and humid, at least for now. So where we're at is still going to be hot and humid. And I've heard that walking into a rainforest is like it like hits you
Yeah.
with the heat and the humidity.
I don't think I could do that very well. Like, okay, so first of all, when I visited Florida, I hated it. I can't deal with humidity. My hair looks absolutely awful. Even though I'm in the Carboniferous, I can't let me have like at least some comfort there. And then like, I'm Filipino. We've gone to the Philippines many times, which is like super close to the equator. And yeah, the humidity there gets really, really bad. And I have a miserable time. It's hard to breathe. I sweat constantly and like you're not evaporating your sweat because it's just so humid. So if it's hot, I'm not cooling down, I'm not thermoregulating because I can't like evaporate the sweat. I'm going to have a hard time. And then like if I have to use a lot of my energy to find food and water and most of that energy is going to just keeping me thermoregulated, that's going to be a really, really hard thing to do, I think, for my main survival. So either I'd have to like go out at night, which is its own danger,
Oh yeah.
early morning at the least when there's some light. But I don't know if I could do anything during the day when things are at its peak heat and peak humidity. I know it's going to be hard.
Yeah, and even modern rainforests, like everybody kind of goes quiet and like tries to chill as much as possible during the hottest part of the day. And all the birds are active in in the dusk and dawn periods, you know? So yeah, that might also be the best time to go find stuff to eat because they're out and about and not just like too hot. Like we're going to be too hot.
But aren't these like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't some of these things ectothermic? So they'd be out later in the day though, because
Oh, yeah, the amphibians. That's a good point. Yeah. They're cold-blooded. These amphibians are. The other vertebrates, the amniotes, might be somewhere in that mesothermic area where they're not quite cold-blooded, not quite warm-blooded yet. Yeah, so that's a good point. So yeah, maybe those things would be out during the heat of the day because they got to warm up. Ooh, we could catch them when they're sunning though, when they're all like lethargic
ooh,
and like slow.
lethargic.
Yes. Yes.
That's sad,
That
but
is
also
bad.
I would need it. I'm like, sorry, I would feel so bad though. I know I would feel so bad. Just like I know, I'm sorry. And I just start going.
Yep. I'd be apologizing the entire time too. Thank you for your sacrifice. Oh my gosh. Yes, that would be tough. The sun though, I mean, If we're in a dense rainforest or rainforest equivalent of the Carboniferous, maybe we wouldn't have to worry about like sun exposure as much.
I don't think so. I mean, when I've gone, the few rainforests I've gone to, there was like little bits of rays that come through the canopy. That's assuming we have like a closed canopy type rainforest. And so that wasn't a big deal. But the heat, you could still feel that heat throughout the air, right? Like, again, trying to breathe in like a super humid environment, there's something about it that you feel like you're taking deep breaths, I remember, but it was still just hard to like breathe in for some reason.
Yeah, and speaking of breathing, there's like a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere. So anywhere from 30 to 35% compared to just 21% today. So we wouldn't get any like superhuman bursts of energy, but it might be a little bit easier to like catch our breath though. So that's nice. It seems like people can survive for a day or two breathing 100% oxygen before oxygen toxicity sets in. So 35% wouldn't be a major issue. Like, hopefully, as long as we aren't there for like weeks or months in the Carboniferous. I'm hoping this is like a short trip.
Yeah. Yeah. The TARDIS is going to pick me up in just a few days. I'm good.
Yeah. We'll survive. Cool. So climate, other than the hot and the humid, I agree with you. That's going to be rough. That's going to be very rough. I am in the same boat. I like it to be cold and dry. Cold and dry. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Like assuming we transport to the Carboniferous and whatever clothes I'm wearing, those, not to be weird, but those are going to be gone because I don't like being sweaty. I don't like being sticky, and everything's going to be that way. So just to survive and like do whatever, I'm going to need to like, naked and afraid this probably.
Yep.
So
I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that. Survival. We must survive at all costs. Survive.
the one thing I know that's going to be hard is I wear glasses.
Oof.
So I'm just going to be fogged up the whole time. So I'm going to have a handicap on that one.
Just squeep. Yep. You're just going to be constantly wiping your glasses off. I didn't think about that either. Man, so many things. So we've talked about food and water. Got that covered. Climate. It's going to be gross. It's going to be awful, but we're going to survive. But what about the environmental and geological hazards of the Carboniferous?
So the higher oxygen, if we light a fire, that's not going to like be super dangerous with just that little bit much more oxygen. It'd probably make it easier at least to start the fire, but we're not going to cause like a huge pyrocane, right?
No, but we would have to be careful about not burning the entire forest down though. So I feel like everything would be easier to catch on fire. So it'll be easier for us to make our own little fire, but it would be easier for a little ember to escape and light the whole place on fire.
Oh no, I'm going to be that wizard that casts fireball.
Yep. So, but that leads into like wildfires though. Like wildfires are easier to start just with a lightning strike, with this high atmospheric oxygen concentrations. So that's like the perfect recipe. So we need to be prepared to like jump into the swamp or a stream or the ocean or a body of water of any kind. So we need to be prepared on that end. Although I feel like we're jumping, what is it, out of the pan and into the fire?
To the front.
I can't remember how that saying goes because we would just be jumping into a swamp with a whole bunch of giant amphibians. Yeah, and we even have evidence of all these giant wildfires. We have charcoal, like a ton of charcoal that we find in the late Carboniferous. And so we know things were catching on fire and burning. And so yeah, we need to be prepared to jump into those swamps. But having a good pokey stick, I think would really help us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Poke, get away from me. No. Not food.
No, go away. My pond now. My pond.
Right.
Well, like when like you were saying, there's like all this coal that comes from like a bunch of like the leaves and stuff falling into these swamps. Do we have to worry about like gases coming out of these ponds that could cause like us to all of a sudden not have a good amount of oxygen in our little spaces?
Like carbon monoxide poisoning or something like that.
So we don't want to poke at everything because next thing you know, I'm releasing a big bubble that's trapped under there and then I'm just on the ground.
That would be bad. I mean, yeah, so it would probably stink like sulfur at least, but we would get over that. We would probably stink like sulfur too, so we'll be hot,
Yeah,
sweaty, and smell like sulfur. Oh
great.
boy. Gonna be a little bit of a stinky time for us for sure.
I I was pretty excited at the start to go to the Carboniferous, just thinking about all the plants. But now that we're starting to talk more and more, I'm like less and less excited about having to play like Eon Survivor here.
Right. I feel like this is a natural progression of these podcasts thus far. Is everybody's like, yeah, let's time travel, and then like, maybe not, maybe not, maybe not, maybe not. So we've got wildfires we got to watch out for. Oh, what about like flooding? Like
Ooh, yeah.
these are all like low-lying areas, and I think there is some geological evidence that suggests that these areas were regularly flooded. So, great, another hazard.
Another hazard. So we'd have to avoid potential fire. We have to avoid flooding. We'd have to avoid going into like these swampy areas. So where would be a good place to like set up a like base camp?
Right.
Like,
We
because if we're going to try to, we'd have to be higher up, but
Yep.
we don't want to be too high because we want to stay somewhere in the canopy. Oh, what if we build like a tree house?
Yeah, or at least something on a platform. Like, you'd wanna be
Yeah.
at least, like, a foot or so off the ground, I would say. Looking for a high place where the other thing is gonna be finding dry kindling, like, enough dryness that we can actually, like, light it on fire. I think we will, since forest fires are pretty prevalent. I mean, it's catching on fire anyways. So, yeah, like, a high spot, and then also build ourselves a little platform out of all of the lepidodendron. We'll have plenty of building material, though. Tons and tons of building material.
In the Philippines, they build these things called bahay kubo, which are like these like huts that are like elevated off the ground that they use. I kind of know how to build one
Sweet.
from seeing that. So that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I'd reach into my Filipino roots and design one of those for the Carboniferous.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. But we do, because of all these lepidodendrons, and they have like a teeny bit of like actual wood material, but it's mostly like on the outside and not so much on the inside. These things like blow over in a strong breeze. So like, we're gonna have to make sure to also have some type of like roof so we don't get smashed by like falling trees, or at least be
Yeah.
wary of strong winds and storms and things like that, knowing that we could get smashed. But there's also like a lot of mud. I mean, we're in a swamp, and when we look in the fossil record, there seems to be this taphonomic bias. So taphonomy is when you're looking at like from what I like to call mud to manuscript. So like how the animal died, how it was fossilized, and then how we find it in the modern times. That's like taphonomy. And the bias is there's different types of environments that you can get fossils from. And it tends to look like you more often than not get these fossil beds that were mud beds and animals getting stuck in mud. So there's like this overwhelming presence of animals getting stuck in mud in the fossil record. But again, I don't know if it's going to be the level of scaredness that us millennials are of like quicksand.
Okay. Yes, but I have my own fear of mud because my first time ever in the field to go fossil collecting with my museum, I was walking back from our excavation site and I was jumping off maybe like a foot tall little ledge, right? And below me it looked like a bunch of dried mud cracks, right? And then I jumped and the next thing I know, I am waist deep in a mud pit.
Oh,
And so I could have been one of those taphonomic studies where I got trapped in a mud pit because I thought it was dried at the surface. And they had to, first of all, they were laughing and taking photos of me, but eventually they helped me get out because I couldn't get out on my own.
no.
My feet were stuck from that suction in the mud. So
That's
I would actually
terrifying.
be very terrified.
Again, pokey stick for the win. Poke everything. I remember one of my first times out in the field, and they told us, like, don't get into the gumbo. So, gumbo is like this weird clay that when it dries out, it almost looks like popcorn. It's called popcorn weathering, but
Oh yeah.
as soon as it gets dry, it turns into the most sticky substance known on our planet. Well, maybe not that sticky, but it's very sticky stuff. And so when we were driving, any low point, I would drive down and then stop before the low point, get out, go like stomp my foot to make sure that it was actually dry, and then we would drive over it. And it took us forever to get anywhere because I was terrified of getting stuck in that mud because you just have to wait for it to dry. And then like a tractor has to come and pull you out. And it's a process that I did not want to be involved in.
Well, based on our experiences, I think we'd be fine then because we have such a fear of this that we would be super aware of these mud holes.
Yes.
So I don't think I think we're fine trying to avoid the mud overall.
Yes. Yes. Whew. All right. Mud and floods and fire and crushed by falling vegetation. And what about just getting a cut?
Oh no.
I mean,
Are we allowed to bring something back? Because that's the one thing I would bring is maybe some antibiotic ointment. Because a single cut and all this heat and everything, I would be so afraid of getting some nasty ancient infection that my body would just be like, well, you're just going to die now.
Yep, you're done. You're toast. I have no knowledge of these things and it's going to kill you. Yep. Keeping something clean and closed would be a challenge for sure.
Could I make like fern armor to protect my skin? That's probably what I would try to do.
I mean,
get a bunch of fronds and just protect my skin that way.
You could totally make a sweet armor suit out of Arthropleura. I mean, we just have to find a dead one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm feeling better. I could totally do that. My D&D brain would be like, yep, armor. Let's do it. Let's increase my AC and survival skills. Let's do this. That would look so cool, too.
It would look really, really freaking cool. Speaking of Arthropleura, we got to talk about animal hazards now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't know what Arthropleura ate. We don't have any mouth parts, but it could be toxic. I don't think they would hunt us, but like, shoot, I wouldn't want to get in the way of one of those or just like have one be like, oh, this is a tree. I'm going to climb on it.
Okay, hold on. Wait, Kelly, though. Wait. Did you see Dune or Dune 2?
I haven't watched the second one yet. I've only seen the first one.
Well, in Dune, the main character is able to ride sandworms, right? Now in my head, I'm like, what if we're riding these giant Arthropleura to get us through the forest, right?
Right?
You get like you could even like kind of surf on them because they're got like that body shape, and then you've got like you can attach like something to the front and like kind of drive them a little bit, and then now you've got like this really efficient way to get through the Carboniferous fern forests.
Yeah, and we think we found some tracks of Arthropleura where we have two sets of tracks, and then right next to one set of track there's just one single set of tracks. So we think that Arthropleura actually like got on top of each other to do, the reproduction of the thing. So they at least had to be able to hold another Arthropleura on top of them, which I'm pretty sure they weighed more than us. So
yeah,
we can totally ride them. Oh, that'd be amazing.
All right.
We're gonna
amazing.
Yeah, we'll ride them, and also they probably know the safe routes.
Yeah,
they
would know where to go. They know what to avoid. They know where to hide. They probably have a good like danger sense of something, so they know where to go escaping like fires or something. So There we go. We've got a mount. I'm good.
Boom. Yep. We got a ride. We got a whip. It's awesome. Love it. So we wouldn't have to be scared of Arthropleura, but there's probably other poisonous and venomous inverts that we'd have to watch out for. Like this is like the heyday of scorpions, for example. There are over 60 described species from the Carboniferous.
And these are big, right?
Some of them are big. So Pulmonoscorpius could get cool name. To the size of a cat, like a fat cat, like a fat house cat. But they are only known from the early Carboniferous. So they might have shrunk down a little bit, but I'm assuming that there were probably some relatively large ones left. But it's really, in modern times at least, you got to watch out for the little ones. It's the little ones that are the most dangerous.
Yeah.
So
those are the ones that have the worst stinger, right? Yeah. The small ones with the tiny claws because they don't need to defend themselves.
Yeah, luckily we still have scorpions around today, so at least we know what our modern warning system is for scorpions.
Yeah.
But they could be another fruit source too. We could totally eat scorpions. People eat scorpions all the
I
time.
Yeah, I could try that. I mean, assuming they're kind of like if maybe lobsterish down the line, just as long as I remove like the poison sac on the end of their tail, I could go for like a giant scorpion. I'm sure their claws would probably be good,
Yeah, little
right?
crunchy, tasty bits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I bet it'd be fine. It'd be fine. Be fine. But the giant amphibians, though, we've kind of alluded to the giant amphibians being probably our biggest predator of us. So some of these were several meters long and they were powerful carnivores, like Ariops. It was like a little over 1.5 meters long, could grow up to 3 meters in some situations. Adults weighed 200 kilograms. Like, oh my gosh. Some of them had teeth. Well, they all had teeth, but some of them even had teeth on the roof of their mouths. And they had,
What?
yeah. So they had palate teeth because these things are
No.
eaten like fish. They're slippery prey or other smaller amphibians. So they got to like hold on tight with backward facing fangs and palate teeth and
That's like triggering my anxiety. I would be so afraid to go near the water if I saw just one do like a lunge attack on like some other land animal.
yes.
And then I would just be too afraid to go near the water. I mean, I already have like a weird thing about crocodilians near water when I was in Florida. As much as I wanted to see them, I was just like, I had this weird fear that I was going to get taken by one.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far I could go near that water if those are in there.
We'd have to be very careful because we think a lot of these. So Ariops was a temnospondyle, a type of weird, big, giant amphibian from this time. It's a whole group of them. So not only do we have to worry about that one, but there's like a ton of them that we'd have to be worried about. Little ones, medium-sized ones, big ones, all sorts of stuff with all these teeth. And we do think that they probably had kind of a similar lifestyle of a crocodilian. So they just like lay in wait and then snap at you.
That's where our big pokey stick comes in.
Pokey stick.
So we're going to hit the water and make sure that they're away from us.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, if we found a dead one, don't you think its skull turned around would be a cool shield with like all the teeth coming out of it?
Yes. Yeah. You'd be like a temnospondyle trainer. Back.
I'm ready for that one. Okay. That would be cool.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Once we learned how to trick them into showing themselves, we'll be way better off, I think. Way better off.
I mean, like if we had some sort of food source that I could throw near the water, get a line attached to it, have them pull it, I would like at least know where they are, and then maybe kind of like I wouldn't try to wrestle it, but like wrangle it somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I could deal with that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we go and croc fishing, only temnospondyle fishing.
Temnospondyle fishing.
Temnospondyle fishing. Yeah, it would be pretty. I would love to see one of these things. Like they're giant amphibian predators. Like we don't have anything like them today. Nothing like them today.
Again, that's where like my science brain, like, ooh, super cool would come in, and I would, try to observe them and like look at like how does their eyes, are they like really like coming up on the surface? Do they float like a crocodilian, right? Are they like observing all around them? Are they like coming up to bathe or sunbathe certain times of the day? Like there'd just be so many cool things to look at this thing that we don't have
right
today,
mm-hmm.
right? That would be fun.
Yep, that would be fun. It would be fun to see all of these. So not only would we have to worry about temnospondyls, we also have these giant tetrapodomorphs, or these sarcopterygian giant predatory fishes, and they were big enough that we would be on the menu.
Yeah. No
Yeah.
water. No water for me.
No water for you. No water for you.
No.
And I mean, we did.
That's a big fish.
That is such a big fish. A ton. Almost 20 feet long, weighing a ton, with sharp, giant, fangy teeth. Oh, no. No, I don't even think our pokey stick would help us with that one.
No, that just make us easier to catch, probably.
You're easier for me to eat now.
Yeah, it would like grab my pokey stick and pull me in the water.
No. That's worst case scenario.
Ooh, Carboniferous Jaws, it's just like...
That's a movie.
Although I would watch that movie.
Yeah.
I would totally watch that movie.
Heartbeat. I'd watch it instantly. Yep. It would probably be way better than the Meg, too. So, no offense, Jason Statham, but yeah. So, speaking of sharks, we got them. We got them in the Carboniferous. No problem. I actually like to refer to the Carboniferous as when sharks had their experimental phase. They get weird. Like there's a locality that's older than this. It's about 324 million years old in Montana, where we have this thing called Stethecanthus, which is probably about 1.5 meters long. And it had like this weird anvil-shaped thing on its head.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I've seen that.
And then you got falcatus, the fish so nice they named it twice. That's but anyways, they have this weird like boomerang shaped thing on the top of their head. They were much smaller, but we got sharks. I'm not sure if sharks would want to eat us at this time, but I mean, why not?
Oh, this is difficult because I want to see them in the water. There's like, again, my science brain's like must see, must observe. And I don't know if that would overwrite my safety protocols. And so who knows at this point.
Right. And we wouldn't have to just worry about them in the marine realm.
The freshwater.
Yes, there were freshwater sharks.
Yeah, no water for me, please.
Yeah, the water is looking worse and worse now. I thought that maybe it would be like okay, but
I think I'll take the arthropods right now over the fish and the sharks.
Yeah, arthropods for sure. Speaking of arthropods, how about spiders? You like spiders?
Absolutely not. No, thank you. I don't I can't do spiders in our day and age. Like I can do most of the smaller ones, but as soon as they get big and tarantula-y, yeah, I run very fast and I don't like running.
Luckily, there's nothing the size of a tarantula, at least based on our fossil record. We've got like this almost spider from France. It's about 305 million years old, but it's pretty small. It was like only like 1.5 centimeters, so it's little. But the most important thing, why I know it's super cute, and I like spiders, so I'm like, show me more. These almost spiders don't have spinnerets, but they did have silk, so they might not have been able to make like big fancy webs like the big orb weaver webs, but they might be making other types of webs, or at least having silk of some kind to do something with their silk, but hopefully no like man-sized webs that we have to deal with.
Okay, but Callie, look, you could do this because I'm not going to touch the spider, but what if we can harvest their sticky, not fancy web and wrap that around our poles, and then we've got our sticky substance to like try to catch our giant dragonflies and our mounts, right? Now we've got another little pet thing that could be a tool resource for us.
Yeah, we just farm spider silk.
Now it's actually an RPG.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so we've got that one little spider that doesn't have spinnerets, so we're not actually sure what it's doing with the silk that it could make, but it does look like there were other spiders with spinnerets that could build webs. They might have been ground dwelling, living in burrows like trapdoor spiders, so like,
oh no.
Watch out for weird patterned circles on the ground. Don't touch it. Poking stick for the win.
Poking stick. So I got to find that wonderful middle ground that's not near the water, the shoreline, so I don't get ambushed by giant amphibians, and stay away from like probably I would assume the deeper forest where these trapdoor-ish spider-like creatures are living. So I got to find that right perfect middle ground. Probably the beach. How does the beach sound? Is there beaches in the Carboniferous?
There would have been beaches, but I wonder, like, if we're in the swamp, would the beach be more like the end of a rainforest that just like ends at the water? So there's not like a whole lot. I mean, there are little tiny like mud beaches, like where caiman and capybaras hang out in modern times. So I bet there would have been some place to be. But that's also probably where things go to access the water too. So it might be like a little animal highway or something. We'd have to be careful. All right. Well, we're hot. It's humid. It's nasty. We might be naked. We don't have to worry about too much about the sun or the amount of oxygen, but we can't stay too long. We got to watch out for wildfires and floods and mud and getting crushed and infections. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
man.
So many things. But there's tons to eat. We've got lots of options for eating. And as long as we can make a pot, we can boil water. So we've got fresh water. We can boil toxic things. We're going to be eating eggs like Tic Tacs. Animal hazards are there. They're real. We got to watch out on the edges of water, definitely, and try not to get in the water if at all possible. But how you feeling? How you feeling about your chances now that we've talked about the late Carboniferous?
No, feeling great. I probably have a good first day, get an armor set from some arthropod, and then the next day probably be a little feeling too brave, and then yeah, that's probably the end of that series for me.
So you kind of mentioned this earlier, but what is one item that you would take back there with you? What's your one item?
I don't even know anymore after talking about all these different hazards, but yeah, I think I'll probably stick with the antibiotic ointment, because who knows what's dwelling in these humid, wet swamps that could bite me, or that could like get into some open wound. And there's a ton of things that would bite me, make some holes or something. So I think that's probably the first thing I would get. I don't need to worry about fire. I could probably make something to get water, got armor, things like that. But the infections, that scares me a lot. So that's probably the first thing I would bring.
That's a good one. I think for the Carboniferous, that's a really smart thing to bring with you. But what would you take back to our time? What's one non-living souvenir that you take back with you?
Non-living souvenir?
Mm,
Can I bring my armor back with me for Comic-Con?
I think that's one thing. It's connected to other pieces. I think that counts as one item.
Okay, then yeah, I'll bring my armor back, because I would kill at a Comic-Con with that.
Win.
I would win all the competitions.
You'd win everything. Well, thanks for joining me, Gabriel. I think we would make a good team. I think we would survive the Carboniferous if we didn't have to be there for very long.
Yeah, I feel very confident if I had you on my side, Callie.
It's time for you to leave the late Carboniferous for good, which feels like a shame because you've only just gone nose blind to the smell. But it's probably for the best, not just because you're tired of being constantly startled by giant bugs, but because these lush and human ecosystems are about to disappear almost entirely. Starting about 5 million years after your departure, an event called the Carboniferous Rainforest Collapse will drastically change the world. The warm and wet climate will be replaced by a cooler and drier one, and the swampy rainforests that define the Carboniferous will give way to much more open and arid environments. Many of the most impressive species you've encountered on your travels will struggle to cope with these changes. Some of the giant bugs will vanish, and others will shrink down. And the water-loving amphibians will decline too, with many species disappearing as their swampy habitats do. But for one group at least, the amniotes with their land-adapted eggs, the Carboniferous rainforest collapse will be a game-changing opportunity. Having already left the water behind, these large-scale environmental changes will allow them to leave the swampy rainforest behind too. In the drier, cooler, and more open environments of the Permian period, amniotes will thrive. And from their revolutionary eggs will hatch diverse species that will populate terrestrial habitats for hundreds of millions of years into the future. The reign of the giant bugs and amphibians is ending, but the reign of the amniotes has only just begun. Thanks for joining us on this journey into deep time. Tune in next episode to see if we survive the biggest mass extinction of all time, the Great Dying at the end of the Permian period. In the meantime, you can find us telling more stories from our planet's past over at youtube.com/eons. This episode was written by Farhan Mehta, fact-checked by me, Callie Moore, and hosted by me and Gabriel Santos. It was edited by Chris Ankiko, and our sound design and mix was by Callie Dishman. The show is produced by Sarah Suda, our script editor is Dr. Paige Madison, and our editorial director is Dr. Darcy Shapiro. Our executive producers are Seth Radley and Hank Green. The executive in charge for PBS is Maribel Lopez, and John Campbell is PBS's Assistant Director of Programming. Eons Surviving Deep Time is a production of Complexly for PBS Digital Studios, and we are distributed by PRX. Until next time, you can always visit us over at youtube.com/eons for more stories from Deep Time.